Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am delighted to be with you on a Friday rather than a Tuesday for the second interview of this week. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as I do at the beginning of every episode, to please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. Also, if you would like to support the podcast and the entire network in another fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.info. There you can leave a tip or a donation. You can also leave a question, and I'm happy to engage with those questions at the beginning of the next episode after receiving said question. But if you do want to support the podcast in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.info. You see the link in the video playing next to me. You'll also see it scrolling throughout the episode. So happy Friday. I hope you had a great week. Hope everything is going well and you have something fun planned for your weekend. Yesterday was the hubby's birthday, so that was lovely. We didn't do a lot, but we did get, I mentioned before that we got something major knocked off our to-do list, and we got the second half of that task knocked off our to-do list. So that very large task is now fully complete, which was not necessarily the most exciting way to spend a birthday, but he was actually very happy to get it taken care of, as was I, and he thought it was a fine birthday present. It rained buckets yesterday also, so we didn't have much opportunity to go out. It's just raining buckets again today, but I also baked him a cheesecake, and it turned out really well, which is great because it was a bit of an experiment. We are working on using ingredients that are better for blood sugar, so creating lower glycemic impact recipes, and I substituted a couple of the ingredients in the cheesecake recipe I had, and it turned out really well. In fact, it was just a small cheesecake because it was an experiment, maybe this big, in a pan about that thick. And I had one piece and he ate the rest. So I think it was a success. And it was his birthday. He's completely allowed to eat his entire cheesecake throughout the day. I mean, it took him many, many hours. He didn't just sit down with a spoon, but I am very happy that he enjoyed it, and I love to bake. So glad that I found something that seems to have less of an impact on blood sugar, and will continue to use that recipe in the future and keep experimenting with different recipes and other ways to use those ingredients. At any rate, let's talk about the author who is returning today. I mentioned at the end of the last episode that Kevin Moore is joining me for his third time on the podcast, and he is talking about the second volume of Christmas stories that he has written, short stories. This one has 11. His first short story, I think, had 7. Short story collection had 7. Let me give you the description of Christmas Stories, Volume 2. Step into the enchanting world of Christmas Stories, Volume 2 by Kevin Moore, where the spirit of Christmas comes alive through the tales that will warm your heart and spark your imagination. In this eagerly awaited follow-up to his #1 Amazon bestseller, Christmas Stories, 7 original short stories, Moore masterfully crafts a tapestry of unforgettable characters and heartwarming narratives that embody the essence of the holiday season. Journey with a young boy who creates a profound and mystical Christmas for his community, a woman who stumbles upon a mysterious pink gift card filled with unexpected surprises, and a troubled young man who hears the magical sound of snowflakes falling. Each story invites you on a path of self-discovery, love, and miracles. With a range of stories from heartbreaking to humorous, magical to everyday, Moore's protagonists experience profound transformations. They find hope, learn valuable lessons, and uncover the true meaning of Christmas. Perfect for savoring by the fire or during life's daily journeys, this captivating collection reminds us that the magic of the holidays is real, if we only open our hearts to it. So again, that is the description of Christmas Stories, Volume 2, and this is the second Christmas theme book that I am talking about this year. So if you are starting to do any Christmas shopping and you want to put this on your list, that might be this might be a good opportunity to do so. You know that I sometimes struggle with short stories, but I really, really enjoy these. I love Christmas stories in general, and these are, you heard that, humorous to heartbreaking, and there's various levels of there's a lot of different emotions going on, and there's one we'll talk about it a little bit, really whimsical story that toward the end of the book that just made me smile. But there's some magical realism. There are people struggling with the holiday. There are people finding unexpected joy in the holiday and giving of themselves. Just a lot of really heartwarming and touching stories. Even the ones that are a little harder still have that ray of hope in them. And so if you're looking for something to read, and like I said, if you're someone who struggles with the holiday, that's represented here as well. So you're going to find just the whole gamut of human emotion within these stories. I really enjoyed them. And even though I sometimes do struggle with short stories, like I said, didn't have that issue with this. And though it's a great during the busy holiday season, maybe you don't have time to read an entire novel and you just want to sit down with a quick short story about Christmas and have, that Christmas joy, that Christmas spirit fill you a little bit, and in a quick snippet. But let's go ahead and let Kevin talk about this collection and how it came into being that he wrote a second collection of Christmas themed short stories, especially since the first two times he was on the podcast, we talked about paranormal, more suitable to Halloween than Christmas. But let's go ahead and turn now to the interview with Kevin. Hello, Kevin, and welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me back. I
I'm
appreciate
glad
it.
to have you back. This is your third appearance on the podcast, so that's always fun. A little bit different of a book this time, though, so I'm
Uh,
looking forward to
Very
that. But
different.
before we get to the book, if you wouldn't mind, just refreshing for people who have heard the interviews before, or introducing for people who don't know you, just share a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So my name is Kevin Moore. I wrote when I was in my 20s, but as I used to write screenplays, but I couldn't really make a living at it, so I did other things. And then about 10 years ago, I started writing again. And I wrote my first book was called a book called Christmas Stories, Seven Original Short Stories that I produced myself, and it did really well. And I didn't know what I was doing. And then I started like tapping into things that were important to me as a child. I've always been fascinated with intuition and paranormal, and I started to try and write again. And at that time, I had also become late in life. I had become a yoga teacher and a Reiki practitioner.
Hmm.
And so I tried to use all of that to write about Jack Kelly in the Book of Souls. And I'm originally from New York City. I grew up in New York. That was my backyard. Um, and then I moved to Los Angeles when I was about 19, and I've been out here ever since.
Hmm.
And I love both places for different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, they're absolutely, they're both large cities, but they're so different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. LA, I feel is like, New York is like you look up, and it gave me the love of architect. Because when I was little, like um we weren't that far from the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building, and those are two magnificent buildings. And I used to say to my mother, no matter where we were going, when I was like 4 or 5 years old, we'd be going to my grandmother's house, which wasn't close to the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building, but I'd say, can we walk past them? And I always would like walk past them, but I have to touch the buildings because they were so magnificent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so someday I thought I would write, but I couldn't spell. So that was like one of
Hmm.
my subjects that were like really not the best for me. And now I have spell check and Word and Grammarly, and it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah. My husband always likes to tell people here that the population of the greater Los Angeles area is more than the entire population of Portugal,
Well,
where
yeah,
we live.
it's true. Yeah. I know. Like when people say, "Oh, well, you're in LA County," and I'm like, "Yeah, LA County is the size of Rhode Island."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's people just think, "Oh, okay, well, you could just," and I'm like, "No, you can't just do that. It's miles away."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When we lived in Northern California, people would say, "Hey, we're flying into LA. Can you pick us up?" And
Oh
we'd be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"No,
Oh
no,
no.
we can't."
Well, The thing about California that I love, and we kind of rediscovered it, my wife and I, during the pandemic because everybody was stuck in, and we were like one of those. We would get in the car and take trips up and down the coast. And California is quite huge
Hmm.
and quite beautiful.
Yeah.
You have it's a cliche, right? You have the ocean, you have the desert, you have the mountains within an hour to 2 hours from each other.
Yep.
And it's so the beauty out here is like such big open space. And like I was saying, like growing up in New York, it was like you always were looking up.
Yeah. So different, but beautiful in their own ways, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I grew up in a very small town, and as a kid, New York and Los Angeles seemed very glamorous and very, very big, which, they are, especially compared to my hometown. I've actually been to New York and spent time there at Christmas time. It is pretty amazing. I've been to Los Angeles, but I haven't really spent as much time in Los Angeles. But I just think it's cool that Kevin has lived in two very iconic different places and has experienced Christmas in each. I have spent Christmas in California, just Northern California, but it really is a different experience. You kind of go all out to replace that Hallmark Christmas feeling, without the snow, but you still decorate like crazy. It's just a fun experience. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, Kevin will talk more about why he decided to write a second volume of Christmas stories. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my conversation with Kevin Moore. Real quick, as we get into this second segment, I do want to remind you once again to go to gsmcpodcast.info if you would like to support this podcast and the network as a whole in a monetary fashion. You can leave a tip or a donation. Again, the link is gsmcpodcast.info. Before the break, Kevin was talking about living in New York and Los Angeles, the difference between each. He was talking about looking up with the architecture, and that's absolutely true in New York. I couldn't believe even knowing kind of what to expect when I got there, just how tall everything was. It's very cool. But let's go ahead and return now to the conversation with Kevin. Not sure who. Oh, Mark is the main character of the book that I'm currently reading for another interview later. Kevin. Return to the interview with Kevin. Well, you mentioned Christmas stories, the original 7 Christmas stories that you wrote that first time. This one is also Christmas stories, but with volume 2. So what made you decide to write a second edition or a second volume of short stories?
Well, it's interesting because like I started the Jack Kelly series and I wrote the Book of Souls, the Book of Demons, and the third installment, Pandora's Box and the Lost Boys, will be coming out in 2025, and it continues the Jack Kelly series. But when you first were introduced to Jack Kelly, he was in 8th grade in
Mm-hmm.
getting ready to graduate from Catholic schools. Now he's getting ready to graduate from high school, and it's a whole new drama. So people kept people kept saying, "Oh, so you're a horror writer. Like I call it paranormal, but they were like,
Yeah.
you're a horror writer." And I said, "Well, I do have a Christmas book
Yes.
out." And so my wife was like, "Well, why don't you write more Christmas stories? And I was like, no, maybe I'll write one story and I'll put it in the old book and sort of do like a re-release.
Hmm.
And so I wrote the first story I wrote was a story called uh, "The Sound of Snowflakes Falling," and it's about it's a romance, but it starts off it's very it's about a troubled young man,
Yeah.
and the only thing that keeps him from falling apart is walking very late at night, and when it snows, he can hear the sound of
Yeah.
snowflake. Um, so I wrote that, and I was like, okay, so I will put this in the old book, and then I was like, I was on a plane, and I was somebody walked past me, and I was reading, so I wasn't paying attention to who was walking past me, but I think it was a female because it smelled feminine and it was
Hmm.
such a nice scent and it
Hmm.
just left kind of a wake in her path. And so I didn't even look to see who it was. I just started going, okay, maybe there's a story here. Like, let me start off with that. Um, and so it gave me the first line and I came up with the character's name. And I was like, okay, now I have maybe the start of a second Christmas story. And
Hmm.
then they just started to come like, and I just was like, okay. And all of a sudden it was so funny because it was like when I was writing them, I was writing them in like May and June,
Hmm.
and it was hot,
Yeah.
but I kept feeling like Christmas was here. Like I was like, I would go, oh, I better put a jacket. And then I'm like, it's 95 degrees out. And so I just kept doing it. And they came to me in various ways. And I was like, okay, so maybe I'm one of those people that write for holidays. It's like Halloween is my time, Christmas is my time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I understand why people say you write horror because Jack's story is it does lean that direction, but it's not like horror where you can't sleep at night. It's
Yeah.
we've talked before, and it's more on the paranormal side. You tend these stories also have some elements of magical realism,
Yeah.
some spirituality. So, do you set out to include those elements in the stories, or do they just kind of appear as you're writing?
I do because I consider myself from a very early age spiritual. Like I feel like I had a relationship with God. However, you know,
Right.
mine, blossomed, but I was raised, I think I said this the last time I was raised Catholic, which is why
Mhm.
Jack was in Catholic schools.
Yeah.
And then I got into, like yoga. And as I got older, I still believe that way. I'm still, I still have that Catholic foundation, but I
Mhm.
feel like I'm more like a Zen Catholic now.
Mhm.
Like um, what I didn't realize I was doing, like I know I always brought spirituality to it because I feel like spirituality is there, even if the person's an atheist in your story,
Mhm.
right? Because it's the absence of something, but
Right.
it's the absence of God. So God is always somewhere in the character. So yeah, I do bring that intentionally, but what I didn't realize is that like when people say, so what's your genre? I think I'm more like fantasy because like you're saying in the book, like Phineas Fitzgerald,
Mhm.
he's
Yeah.
a little boy with some magic, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so I do like whimsy. I realized that I do like things that are whimsical. I mean, some of the stories are a little more, based in reality and they're a little stronger, but I do like to um put it and like Nowhere Falls has ghosts in it. So
Yeah. Well, even the
yeah.
first story with the credit card or the debit
Yeah.
card that the gift card that just keeps working.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The very pink Christmas. Like I love that story because that was the story that came from that person passing me on the
Oh, okay.
plane sent because I was like, okay, what would this person be that smells like that? And so then I got the character first was Harlow Harper, right?
Right.
And she's like, really, she finds fashion to be art, but it creates a problem in her life with money and
Yeah.
overspending, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And then she just comes across the pink card.
Yeah.
And then where does it take her? because
Yeah,
she could spend the rest of her life just using it, right, for herself, but she
right,
doesn't.
right.
Yeah.
And when you meet her, that's what you think that's probably what she's going to do because she's talking about her credit cards being maxed out. She's shopping. She knows she shouldn't. So you're getting this image of this woman, and then she just kind of goes, which I
Yeah,
think
right. She's like,
is
what else can I do with this?
yeah,
And then, someone who read the book talked about the ending and they were like, I love the ending because it was the ending I didn't see coming.
yeah, yep, which is great.
So yeah, but it's true. Like yeah, no. So all my stuff, I is there is a little element of because I'm also a lucid dreamer. I think you and I talked about that the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
time. Like, yeah, and so I like to put that in my characters too because I do think that if you go back and it's not even just biblical, you go back in the great societies, right? People used to use dreams
Hmm.
to help them in interpret their lives. So I
Yep.
like to put that in there because I have a book that we're editing right now that is called Waking Sleeping Beauty. And it's about three women with very different lives in Los Angeles. And it's what I call it is a spiritual thriller, but it doesn't fit Christmas. It doesn't fit paranormal either. It's basically a crime story in LA, but it's about their awakenings.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I do definitely bring spirituality to everything I do, or
Yep.
I try.
And so, do you often find inspiration from? I mean, it was a scent. It was a scent of a woman, a person that you didn't even see. So, do
Yeah.
you often get just kind of flashes of, hey, that could be something?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And like sometimes it doesn't work. Like Nowhere Falls was the second incarnation of that story. So I wrote it the first time because I came up with a name and his name was Dash Winters. And I liked the idea of a place and I called it Nowhere Falls because it was like in his head, it was like it wasn't a place, it wasn't a destination. It was a
Mm,
place you passed through to get to somewhere else.
yeah.
And he ends up stopping and living there. And so when I first wrote the story, it didn't work at all. And I tried it. I tried working on it with somebody and it wasn't working. So I just completely threw it out and I turned it into a completely different story with ghosts and magic. And the first time around, it wasn't that at all. Um, but yeah, so to answer your question, yeah, like if I get the name of something or the name of a character, I'm like, okay, so if you grow up with a name like Harlow Harper or Phineas Fitzgerald, like how does that, you know, like I like my name, but it's not that. It's
Right.
not that
Yeah.
Winters, you know what I mean? It's not, Phineas Fitzgerald. There's something like, musical to some of those names, and I'm like, how does that make a person? Or if you live in a town like Nowhere Falls, how does that make you feel?
Right.
You know? So, and then I try and find like the story behind it. Like, what does he really want? Or what does she really want? Like, what does Harlow Harper really want? What is she? She's probably should have been a designer,
Hmm.
or an editor for, Cosmopolitan or Vanity Fair, right? But to her, clothing was art.
Yeah.
Um, So then I try and find it like that. And then sometimes it just doesn't work. Like sometimes you could have a great name and you'll try it. What I like about short stories is you can invest as much time in it, and sometimes they come rather quickly. The last story in this book is called Unpacking Christmas, which I thought was perfect for the ending because it's like you just wrote 10 Christmas stories and now it's about this older lady who's going to move out of her house.
Hmm.
And, she starts, and that was based on somebody I knew. And so it was like that came to me very easily,
Hmm.
came to me much easier than some of the other stories because she was trying to put a whole lifetime
Yeah.
into boxes.
Hmm.
And of course, she stopped on the Christmas stuff because it's a Christmas book.
Yes.
I mean, I could have if I was writing a thriller or something like that, I could have been something else in the box. But it was the Christmas stuff that sort of awakened her whole existence for her.
Hmm.
And it was just a perfect place for me. But it was sort of handed to me because I knew somebody who was going through that at the time.
Yeah. Yes, that story was very poignant and very appropriate as the last story in the collection. I I would compl I'm terrible about packing because I get completely nostalgic about everything and start looking through boxes, and the Christmas boxes would absolutely get me. My Christmas boxes get me every year when I open them. Doesn't matter. My parents bought us an ornament every year growing up, and so obviously some of those ornaments I have seen for almost half a century, and it's still every year when I open them, I get just as excited about seeing them again. So Christmas boxes absolutely get me with the nostalgia. But we are going to take our second break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about some of the unexpected twists that many of the stories have. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Kevin Moore. Before the break, we were talking about the last story in his collection of Christmas stories. It's called Unpacking Christmas and reminded me a lot of my own Christmas nostalgia. But let's go ahead now and return to that conversation with Kevin. I like how often your stories take maybe not a full like 90-degree turn, but they often go in a direction that you maybe don't expect, like the Harlow Harper's story, or her
Harlan
story.
Harper, yeah.
Thank you, sorry, her story kind of goes in a direction that like the ending you might not expect, or nowhere falls when he finds the box and it says "Do not open." You're not quite expecting that story to go the way it was after that warning, right?
Yeah.
So do do you plan those, or again, do they kind of come through the writing?
Well, I'm like one of the I don't consider myself like they say like the seat of the pants writer, or somebody who plots every single little thing out. I'm sort of in the middle somewhere because I feel like you have to have room for um something fun to happen. So no, to answer your question, like I knew I wanted him in Nowhere Falls. I knew I wanted him in that building, the Victorian place. I knew there would be a ghost, but the box, I was like, oh, this is a perfect leeway. And then like where, because I do feel like you have to, for myself anyway, like you have to give yourself some room for, I don't want to use like to find some kind of surprise and magic, you know? It
Mhm.
was like when I wrote the Book of Souls, Casper Greenstreet, who's the ghost, was only supposed to have a very small part. And when I started writing him, I was like, oh, I love this guy, so it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what I try to do in all my stories. I try to be, you know, tie up some of the holes. Like I have
Mhm.
in my head, like this is where I want to go with this, but it's okay to make a left when you should have took the right
Right.
because you might find something surprising and fun. And if I find it surprising and fun, hopefully the reader will find it surprising and fun rather than going connect by no, color by numbers, that kind of thing. So it's
Right.
like you know exactly what you're going to get. I'd like somebody to be surprised and go, like you're saying, like, oh, I didn't actually see that coming
Yeah.
because I didn't see it coming either until I was like, I could do it this way or I could do it that way. And maybe this is, maybe more fun for the reader to find. I felt like that with Harlow Harper and Phineas Fitzgerald and Dash. Like because he does find that box and it says do not
Hmm.
open. And he's like, thinks he's a man of integrity, but he's like, oh, what's in the box?
Right. Well,
I
yeah.
mean, I like everybody has to answer that, right? It's if you moved into a new apartment, it says do not open. Don't you want to open it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look what happened to Pandora. Uh,
Yeah, right, exactly.
um, were there any particular types of research that you did for any of the stories or no?
Um, like in the novels, I do a lot of research because you just mentioned Pandora's Box, and that is the name of the third book. It's the Pandora's Box and the Lost Boys
Yeah.
in the Jack Kelly series. In this, yeah, I do find like I'll try and do a little bit of research. But in a short story, like you can get away with maybe you can't. Maybe I think you can get away with things that you can't in a full 300-page novel because people are going to go, is that possible? Like, and that's where the whimsy and the fantasy and the magic comes in for me. Like I could get away with stuff.
Hmm.
If you open a box that
Right.
somebody left, you could get away with something. And usually, like, especially with short stories, I want to know my subject when I start writing that because I don't want it to be something I have to dig into and maybe I don't have enough time to flush that out. And so you can get stuck there. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of the stories. Um, well, I in the sound of snowflakes falling, I did look into a little bit of mental health, and I got
Hmm.
because my main subject, Sebastian Clover, is having a real serious problem,
Yes.
and I happen to have a daughter who's a psychologist, so that helps. So I could
Yes.
say, would this person feel this? Would this person be doing that? So
Hmm.
in that sense, I did. But most of the other stories, I don't think I had to really do a lot of deep research on because I know Christmas.
Sure.
Um, yeah, and yeah, so not in this one, but in Pandora's Box and the Lost Boys, I had to do a lot of research, which I liked because it's I don't want to give it away too much, but the Lost Boys come from different eras,
Oh,
so
okay.
I had to make sure I knew the dress,
Yeah.
the speak.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
A sort of silly question, but the one story toward the end with Santa's reindeer.
oh yeah, the ragtag fires.
Santa's reindeer have some issues. Again, we don't want to give too much of the story away, but did you draw yourself a diagram? How did you? I mean, there's 12, right? You got to keep track of names and animals.
Yeah.
My brain, the
Well,
whole time I'm reading it, I'm like, wait, which one is here and which one is going? Like, so did you draw yourself a diagram? Because I would have had to.
yeah, no, I did, like I said, I loved Christmas growing up, so I know the reindeer pretty well, but I did play a few songs so I could, on Dasher, on, like that part of it. But the reason why I wrote that one was because I feel like I read some reviews of um my first book, and people will say, oh, they're very serious. Some of them are very serious. But
Hmm.
I do feel that way about the holidays because I feel like Christmas can be a dichotomy, right? Some people,
Yeah.
you've got the great movies, the great music, the great food, but there's also
Hmm.
people's melancholy in the past and all of that. So I really wanted to do something that at least one story would be you could read to a 5 or 6 or 7 year old
Yeah.
from the book. Um, and so that was kind of fun because I was like, okay, well, it's also about team building, right?
Yeah.
Something goes wrong. We just came out of a pandemic, so I was like, okay, what would that look like if something like that happened in the North Pole?
Yeah. Yeah. That one, I thought that one was very fun. But that brings another point though. You said people say that your stories are very serious, and they can be, but I feel like there's always an element of hope running
Yeah,
through all of them. Is that something that you want people to take away from the book or the stories themselves?
absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think that, for me, why I like writing something, especially short stories around Christmas time, because it's such a heightened level of emotion for a lot of people. And, you know, they all overcome something. And there is that hope at the end of the day that, like, I will get through this, life will go on. And it's to get back to Pandora's box. When I did research on that, because of, when I was writing it, the Jack Kelly stories, uh, there is a belief in one of the stories, because Pandora's box comes in a variety of different, from a variety of different cultures. And one of the things that they said was she panicked when all of those things were getting out of the box, that she closed it before the last thing in the box was able to get out, and that was hope. So yeah, I love to bring hope into the story, because it's just in any story that I write, I think it comes with spirituality, because I think you know, what's that saying? Hope breeds eternal, right? Like everybody
Hmm.
wants to be hopeful,
Yeah.
you know. I hope I get better. I hope I get that job. I hope I have children. I hope my
Right.
children are good kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
That makes me think. I wonder how many times a day we say variations of "I hope XYZ." Never really,
Yeah.
never really clocked it before. Um,
Yeah, yeah. But no, it's true.
yeah, it's a
So yeah,
Christmas book.
definitely hope.
Yeah, it's a Christmas book. You love Christmas. What's your favorite part of Christmas?
Well, I'm one of those people that had that, you know, um, my Christmases when I was a kid, my parents were at their best during Christmas. They weren't always at their best. I grew up in a chaotic household, um, but they were at their best during the Christmas season. And then when I was a teenager, my mom died 2 days before Christmas.
Ooh,
So that's why I always like to bring, not just one thing where it's,
yeah,
cotton candy and, pie, like that there's other layers underneath it. My
yeah.
best thing about Christmas that I like the best is probably two things: the music and the Christmas lights, and that feeling of hope, like that child that's sitting in his bed hoping for Santa Claus, that
Hmm.
person that, is a firm believer in the Holy Family and that trip to Bethlehem. And, all of those things, they really come alive for me. And I really I just love that whole season. Like, you're just
Yeah,
walking somewhere, and all of a sudden you hear that, Nat King Cole singing the Christmas song, and it's like, so it
yeah.
can connect you to 15 different things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, you've you've lived in New York and you lived in Los Angeles. Those are very different Christmases, I would imagine.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
do you like Christmas in Los Angeles? Do you prefer to go to the snow because in California that's what we say, right? We go to the snow. We don't
Go to the
have
snow.
snow.
Go to the
You
snow.
know,
Uh, Very different. I don't think a city gets as dressed up as New York does for
mm,
Christmas. But I like, there's all kinds of things you can find in out here. Like, you can be down like in Huntington Beach, and they'll have an ice skating ring right by the Huntington Pier, and the Pacific Ocean's right there. So it's a different type of Christmas, and there's all dressed up anyway. Um, and I've had some really great Christmases out here. Like, I always thought that I was going to end up uh like hanging myself by with Christmas lights, because my first house, I had my kids were little. I had this big kind of Christmas tree in front of the house. And I used to
mm.
climb on the roof with the lights and wrap them around myself, and then jump into the tree and put the lights around the tree. And I was like, yeah, this will be the way my demise. Like, your husband's hanging from the
What?
tree,
I'm sorry. I'm just
But
picturing your
yeah,
wife's
so
face. I'm imagining myself and picturing your wife. I'm
yeah,
projecting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. She would never come outside when I was doing that.
No.
But yeah. So yeah, it's they celebrate it out here. We have our Christmas markets, but you could be in short pants and a t-shirt as
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
It's the spirit of Christmas. It's all inside.
Yep. I agree. Laughing about that story. In fact, today is, yeah, tonight, it is night here. It's very dark. As I was getting ready to put up this episode, I'd forgotten that I hadn't told my husband the story because he loves to decorate for Christmas. And so I went and told him, and I was laughing and said that, I said I wouldn't want to watch him if he did that. Well, first his comment was, yeah, what's wrong with that? And I said, you're on your own. I'm going to listen for the crash and the scream, and then I'm calling 911. And he said, no, your job is to catch me. And I was like, no. But at any rate, we're going to take another break. When we come back, Kevin will be talking about works in progress. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Kevin Moore. Before the break, we were talking about how not to decorate for Christmas, or I mean, it seems to have worked for him, so maybe it's a way to go. But I'm not going to recommend it. Don't take, yeah, no, I'm not going to recommend that method. But you do you, and Kevin will do Kevin. Let's go ahead and return to that conversation. You've mentioned the book about the three women. You've mentioned Jack's third book. What are those in various stages of still being worked on? Are you working on something new? What's going on for you writing wise?
Okay, so I'm working with an editor on Waking Sleeping Beauty, which is, the title obviously is based on the fairy tale.
Yep.
It's a very different, these three women are not waiting for some prince to come and wake them up. That they become awake in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
That is in the process of being edited. Pandora's Box and the Lost Boys is done. I'm just getting ready to submit it to the person I work with, Hannah. And so those two are, they're finished, but the editing on the other one still has to be done, and that'll probably take me a couple of months once I get it back. I found some letters that I had written to my son. I don't know if you and I talked about this the last time, but I have a disabled child,
Okay.
and he's a man now. He's a grown up now. But I
He's
wrote
always
him
your child,
letters.
though, right?
Yeah, he's still my child. And I just found out I'm going to be a grandfather.
Oh,
So,
congratulations.
and my daughter is naming her Harper. I don't know if it came from Harlow Harper, but she's naming him Harper, her Harper. But so I found letters that I had written him a long, long time ago when he was a baby, and I'm going through those um, to see if there's something I can do with those. I also have gone through, because Waking Sleeping Beauty was based on a screenplay that I wrote
Mm,
called Living in the City of Angels. So I'm going through some of my old screenplays, and I'm seeing if there's a novel there.
sure.
And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm doing like a lot of searching and working on those kinds of things. Um, I wrote a screenplay about the greenhouse effect, which is global warming many years ago. But it was, if you could believe it, it was a romantic comedy when I wrote it. So now I'm like, okay, let's see what we got. So yeah, I'm going through some old writing to see if I could give it a facelift and if it holds muster.
Yeah.
I also found a story that I wrote many years ago during the AIDS pandemic because I knew quite a few people who passed away from AIDS through
Mm.
uh, of various ways. And so I'm looking to see if I can find something there.
Yeah.
Because I do find when I'm looking at all of these stories, there is still something spiritual in there.
Mm.
And so I'm like, okay, let me see. So I guess I'm doing research on what I want to write next.
Yeah. But I would imagine it's kind of fun. A, you're looking back at your past work, but B, you never know what might jump out. Maybe it's something similar. Maybe it sparks a whole new idea, that takes you in a direction you didn't expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's what happened with Waking Sleeping Beauty, because the story was originally about a female police officer, a detective, and the other two characters were very minor.
Mm.
And then when I revamped it, all three of them are very there's the three of them are major characters in the book, Waking Sleeping Beauty, and I found their stories. So yeah, I'm hoping. Yeah, it is fun, but it's also like sometimes you're like looking and you're like, oh my God, this is crap.
Well, I'm
You
sure
know what I
there's
mean?
that.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, yeah, no, this is crap. But and then, like with Boardwalk and Park Place, I feel like there might be something there,
Okay.
that I could get my teeth into.
Halloween and Christmas tend to be your holidays. Would you ever
My
write
seasons.
would you ever write short stories about Halloween?
I don't know. I mean, that's an idea. Thank you.
Sure.
Like,
I'll expect
um,
some. No, I don't know.
yeah,
Name a character after me.
yeah. Okay, sounds good. I don't know, like because um, I've never written a short story that was based, like a Halloweenish, scary, paranormal. So I think maybe that I should try one and
Mm.
see what I could come up with, because when I first started writing about Jack Kelly, I did not think it was going to be a series.
Hmm.
I just thought I was going to be one and done. Um, but then I felt like, oh wow, there's a lot of different ways you can take somebody who's got some psychic abilities that can
Yeah.
see ghosts and stuff. Um, so I don't know, but it's worth a look.
Yeah. Could
I'm
be
still
fun.
surprised that I write paranormal. I really am because my earlier stuff, like when I'm going through all of this stuff, no horror in here at all.
Huh. Well, that was apparently the place you
Yeah,
were
I
at when
grew
you
into
started with
it.
Jack. Yeah. We were just talking about the possibility of Halloween stories, but do you have a preference when it comes to writing short stories or novels, or do you like them both equally?
Yeah, I think I like them both equally, to tell you the truth. I think a novel, they're both fun and difficult in different ways. Like a novel, you have a character and you're carrying them through a very big piece. Um, and then a short story, even though it's a short story, you've got to give the reader a sense of place, like not just, a place like New York or Los Angeles, but a sense of place, like what is really going on in this story? What does it mean? There should be a theme in each short story, like whether it's redemption, like, in an unexpected guest, right? It's the father who is really uh looking for redemption. Um, so
Hmm.
like I try to remember that in short stories and you find that out when it's not working. Like you think it's working and then you read it to somebody and as you're
Mm.
reading it to somebody you're like, oh, this I never got to what I was trying to say here.
Right.
Or I'm saying it so softly that nobody's going to hear me. Um, so yeah, no, I like them both. I think it's a little it's a little more satisfying with a short story because most of the time it's not going to take you a year or 2 years to write it.
Right.
It could, like a Very Pink Christmas came to me. I probably was done with that in a week
Wow.
because I was like, okay, okay, okay. And this is how she finds this, basically her story is how she finds Christmas, what the
Hmm.
meaning of Christmas is.
Yeah.
It becomes not about the presents, getting them, but about how do you give it, like, and you can start that from the spiritual part of Christmas, where Christmas started with like the father giving the son, you know, to the world, right? So that's a
Hmm.
gift. And then you had Saint Nicholas, which
Right.
was the patron saint of children, and he wanted to give them something. And
Yeah.
then, Santa Claus came, and it's all about giving and how do you give? And that's the story in uh with Dallas, right? She realizes like gifts don't have to be wrapped. They could be
Hmm.
something you give of yourself to somebody. Um, and A Christmas wish, right? So
Yeah.
she's just, because she's a marketer, she's in merchandise, and then she realizes that the best gift she could give to the people that work for her
Right.
is herself.
Yeah.
So so yeah, so I think sometimes for me, as you can see, my hair is white. I'm on the other side of 30.
Or you just went gray really, really young. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I did. You know what? I actually did. Really did. I went gray. By the time my daughter was born, when I was 35, I was completely gray,
Oh, wow.
completely. And I just was like, I think I tried one of those products like just for men, and I
Yeah.
was like, uh, this isn't going to work for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so the short stories, like I feel complete, like, all right, this one is good. Now let me just put it over here and let
Yeah.
me see where it works in the book. And it's funny because I was working with an editor on this Christmas Stories Volume 2, and they suggested I did not put the ragtag flyers in there. They said,
Mm.
you've got a lovely group of stories, and they're mature, and they work on all of their levels. And then you have this one story that is really geared for children. And I said, no, I did. That's exactly why it should be in the book.
Yeah.
Because, that's what Christmas does. You asked me before what I like about Christmas, right? And it's like that it brings out that child side of you, right? That
Hmm.
now you don't worry about what you're getting. Like you maybe got somebody some simple little thing that will be meaningful to them, and it brings out such joy in you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
When it
I
comes
don't
to
know if I
shorts,
fully answered that question, but I
yeah,
hope
no,
I did.
we just, which do you prefer? And yeah, just
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you don't prefer either. But when you're writing short stories, is it just sort of a gut feeling this one's done, or how does that process work for you? I'm an overthinker, so I I would overthink the
So am
endings of
I.
everything.
So am I. I feel you because I overthink everything. What I'll do is I will put it aside. I'll say, I think I've got something here. And if I think I've got something here, then I will put it aside and then um go through it. Like, and when I said I had the story for A Very Pink Christmas in a week, I wasn't done with it in the week. I was done with the story, like I had fully written it. But then I would go back and say, oh, okay, let me change this. Let me
Hmm.
make her, more thoughtful in this position. Why is she doing this? So I always put everything aside. What I did with Pandora's Box and The Lost Boys was I put it aside for maybe 6 to 9 months while I wrote Waking Sleeping Beauty. And then because after I was done with it, the best advice I got as a writer was somebody who said he was teaching a class and he said, just put it down, get everything down, just finish it. Even if you don't go back to the first chapter, if you're on chapter 10, just finish the book.
Hmm.
Then you can go back. And so what I started to do was I let it sit for a couple of months. And with Pandora's Box and The Lost Boys, I was like, I think it's crap. And then when
Mm.
I went back, And 6 to 9 months later, I was like, it's not great. I think there's something here, and I think it's a fun ride, but I need to clean it up.
Sure.
So, you know what I mean? Do you feel like that
Yeah.
when you're writing? Like you go, okay, let me just put it aside, and it's probably not, I'm like, I don't really feel great about it. And then you get back and you start reading, you go, wait a minute, there's a lot of things that are working here.
Yeah, I've had that of, oh, this is not as bad as I originally, like sometimes I'll cringe before I even start reading it, and then I start reading and go, oh, okay, I don't sound like an
Yeah,
idiot.
yeah. Yeah, 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 right, exactly. Or this is, this plot is working.
Yeah. I think time to put things away isn't always possible, depending on, timelines and time frames, etc. But it really, distance really does help. I've come to find out when it comes to my own work that I'll read things that I haven't read in a while. And maybe it's not even that I've put it away to work on it later, but I'll just read something that I've written. Maybe I wrote it in grad school, and I'll read it and I'll think, oh, hey, yeah, just like I said, that doesn't suck as much as I expected it to. So, oh, yay, good. But anyway, it is good advice if you have time to put things away and come back to them when you have more of an opportunity. But time for our final break of this episode. When we come back, what Kevin has been reading. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with Kevin Moore. Before the break, Kevin was talking about going through old works and getting new story ideas, or maybe reworking existing story ideas, just finding inspiration in things that he has already written. Let's go ahead and return now to the conversation with Kevin. Well, on the flip side of writing, what have you been reading lately?
Oh gosh. So I read Conclave, which is about the picking of the Pope. It's
Mm-hmm.
now a movie. I also wrote and I read These Little Lives. Um, it's about in Ireland they were having the nuns were running like this laundry. And what was going on was there was a lot of what they called wayward girls, and they were
Mm.
taking their babies and putting them up for adoption. And that's also a new movie with Cillian Murphy, but it was a really good book. Um, I, oh my gosh, I've been actually listening to a lot of books lately, but those are the last two that I've read.
Okay.
Uh, yeah.
Are you a
Do you have any
seasonal reader? Like, will
recommendations?
you start reading Christmassy stuff around this time, or do you not? Are you a mood reader?
No, I'm not. I won't uh I won't be reading I might, who knows? Somebody might recommend something to me and I'll pick it up, but I've I'm kind of going back to read some people that I always wanted to read. Like I have a couple of books waiting for me at the library. I'm on hold with a couple of Joan Didion books
Mm-hmm.
that I want to read because I like her.
Yep.
Um So that's old, very old school. And then I
Yep.
like to read something new and fun, and um Conclave was very interesting because it's like that, you know, you'll never get to experience something like that. Like you have all of
Right.
these cardinals and inside this institution,
It's the
and it's,
process is,
not always pretty,
and the process, like, were they high when they came up with the process? It's a really
Yes.
interesting, convoluted
Yeah.
process that they go through.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Uh, I read a couple of really good. My gosh, my mind is like slipping right now. But yeah, I've been reading a few different things. I'm reading The Witch of New York.
Hmm.
Have you heard of it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm reading. I just started that.
Okay.
I, you
Okay.
know, the book with Jack Kelly, there is actually, I brought witches into it because I had ghosts and I had shapeshifters. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to bring a vampire, but I could bring a witch or two.
Okay. Now I'm
And then
intrigued.
after I finished it, I seen that this book, I had heard nothing about it. It was called The Witch of New York. And I think it's less about the supernatural and more about a case.
Hmm.
So I'm just getting started with it, so I don't know.
Okay. All right. If people want to know more about you and your books, internet presence, so website, social media you're active on, usual
So
question.
I have a website is kevinmoorepublishing.com. I'm on Facebook with that. You can contact me there. I think I also put my email in my book. Um, let me see. Isn't it scary when you like go, which email?
Which, yeah,
But
that's
yeah, I put my email because I love to do I started doing uh, some book clubs.
oh good.
And that is so fun when when people read your book and it's like you're invited and then you're sitting there talking to them about it and they're going, why did you do this in your
Right.
book? Or what did this mean? So anyway, yeah. And they could also reach out to me on moorebooks59@gmail.com
Okay.
and I will respond to them.
All right.
Um, yeah, yeah. I'm just starting to get into that. I'm not great at social media, to be honest with you. But I have a Facebook following, and yeah,
Okay.
I'll definitely get back to whomever reaches out to me and has a question about my stories.
Nice. Well, Kevin, I've taken you on a few different tangents during our time
Oh
together.
no,
So
I tend to ramble.
is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure you highlight?
No, I think you're a great interviewer. So I think
Yeah.
we've commented on everything. You've taken me down every path. Supernatural, whimsical, fantasy, Christmas, realism.
Okay.
I think we've covered it all.
All right. Well, good. And thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to talk to me about Christmas Stories, Volume 2, and everything
My
else that we
pleasure.
talked about. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for Kevin to come back for his third appearance on the podcast, this time to talk about Christmas stories. It is, as I said, it's a very enjoyable collection of short stories. If you are looking for something to get you in the Christmas spirit, or you're looking for a gift to give for Christmas, this is definitely something that you can put on your list. There are 2 volumes, so you can get both of them or one of them, and just a really enjoyable collection of stories, very poignant, very heartfelt, lots of different emotions, as I said at the beginning, and lots of different characters. There's some, like we said, there's some spirituality, there's some magical realism, there's whimsical, there is a lot of different stories. So I think that anyone who reads this book will find a story that appeals to them. Most likely more than one, but certainly anyone can find a story that's going to appeal to them in this collection. So go check it out. And if maybe Christmas isn't your thing, but you're more of a Halloween person, you've got the whole Jack Kelly, not the whole Jack Kelly series. There's only 2 books out so far. The third one is coming, but you have the Jack Kelly series that you can check out in the meantime. In the meantime, I do hope that you will join me for my next episode. I've got maybe two episodes next week. Again, had 2 scheduled over the weekend. One has potentially been rescheduled, but could still be for next Friday's episode. But definitely an episode on Tuesday. I will be talking with Holly C. LaBarbera, double checking on the pronunciation of her last name, about her book All I Know. This is a novel about It's told from the perspective of one woman and her, but it's about two childhood friends who grow up and go through a lot of different experiences together, and they both come from very challenging family situations, very close-knit families, but just the navigation of relationships and expectations and learning to be adults with people with whom you've been children can be tricky, and especially when those relationships change. I'm looking forward to speaking with Holly more about this book, and I hope that you will join me for that conversation on the next episode. In the meantime, as always, if you are a fan of this podcast and you have not done so already but would like to, it would be greatly appreciated if you could leave a positive review. It really, really does help the algorithm, along with liking, following, subscribing, whatever it is on the platform on which you are either listening to or watching this episode on. Again, very helpful. And if you want to follow along on social media, you can do so on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Come find the podcast on social media. Come hit me up with all of your burning questions or not so burning questions, or just comments about which authors you have read or what books you're reading now, or are you getting ready for holiday reading? All of those things that I always want to know the answers to. I hope you're having a great Friday. I hope that you have something wonderful planned over the weekend, whether that's sleeping all weekend, whether that's running errands, whether that's a combination thereof, or you're working this weekend. But regardless, I hope the weekend gives you exactly what you need, and I hope it gives you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to